Welcome to the Deep Dive. We take the sources you, our curious listener, provide and, well, we extract the key insights. The aim is to give you a solid understanding without feeling overwhelmed.
And today, based on the text you sent us, we're looking into the ethics of René Descartes.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because everyone knows Descartes for, I think, therefore I am, metaphysics, how we know stuff.
Right, epistemology, philosophy of mind, but ethics. It's not the first thing that springs to mind.
Exactly. But his ethical ideas, even though they aren't all in one neat book, they're actually pretty rich and deeply connected to everything else he thought. A lot of people don't even know he wrote on it.
That's true. So our mission today is really to unpack the core of his ethics. We'll touch on some key debates, why these, centuries-old ideas might still be surprisingly relevant.
We'll be digging into his views on virtue, happiness, the role of our emotions, the passions, and how it all hangs together with his bigger philosophical system, all based on that text provided.
Okay, so Descartes and ethics. It is a bit surprising, like you said. You look at his big hitters' discourse on method, meditations, principles of philosophy.
Yeah, ethics isn't front and center. Even his contemporaries weren't always convinced. Leibniz famously said something like,
Descartes did not advance the practice of morality much. Pretty blunt.
ouch, yeah. And it's true, unlike others. He didn't write the book on ethics.
Which makes it a bit of a puzzle, doesn't it? You have to piece it together.
So where do we look?
Well, the source points us to a few key places. Part 3 of the discourse, the preface to the French edition of the Principles, that dedicatory letter to Princess Elizabeth in the Principles.
Ah, Princess Elizabeth. Correspondence comes up a lot, right?
Definitely. The letters, especially with Elizabeth, but also Queen Christina of Sweden and Pierre Chanute, they're crucial. And the passions of the soul is another big one.
And is there like a development? Did his ideas change over time?
It seems so. The source suggests distinguishing an early phase around the discourse in 1637 and then a later, maybe more mature phase, roughly 1644 to 1649. That's when we get the French preface, passions, and a lot of that key correspondence.
Okay. Now, the source mentions a really powerful image he used, the tree of philosophy.
Ah, yes, that's central. He pictured metaphysics as the roots,
Right, the foundation.
physics as the trunk,
Okay.
and then the branches are all the other sciences. He specifically names medicine, mechanics, and morality.
Morality is a branch, not the roots.
As the highest branch, actually, he claimed this morality wasn't just any old ethics, but the highest and most perfect moral system, something that presupposes knowledge of all the other sciences. It's the ultimate level of wisdom, he says.
Wow. That really reframes things. So all the deep thinking about metaphysics and physics, it was ultimately leading towards ethics.
That's the implication. It suggests the main payoff of philosophy for him was this ethical culmination. But, commentators debate how truly systematic it all is.
How well does it actually connect back to the roots and trunk?
Exactly. Both its internal consistency and how it really links up with the rest of his system. And the source clarifies there are kind of two sides to ethics or la morale here.
Two sides.
Yeah, there's the theoretical part, the theory of virtue, happiness, passions, and then the practical side. Actually exercising virtue, being happy, managing your passions day to day.
Theory and practice. Got it.
And most agree the theoretical ethics depends on the rest of the tree. But the specifics, like how exactly does mechanics feed into ethics? He doesn't really spell that out fully. Yeah.
Bit hazy on the details then.
And there's also disagreement on whether the practice of virtue, actually living it, requires you to know all that metaphysics. Some say yes, some say no.
Okay. So before we get to this perfect moral system at the top of the tree,
Right.
he offered something more immediate, right, in the discourse.
Yes, exactly. The provisional morality. Think of it as a temporary toolkit for living.
While he was doing his whole radical Tao thing, questioning
Right.
everything.
Precisely.
Yeah.
He couldn't just pause life while he rebuilt his knowledge from the ground up. He needed rules to operate by. It counters that worry about skepticism leading to inaction. If you doubt everything, how can you decide anything?
Right, the apraxia objection. So what were these temporary rules? The source says it's maybe 3, maybe 4 maxims.
Yeah, there's a little ambiguity there. Let's break them down. First maxim. Obey the laws and customs of your country, stick to your religion, and generally go with the most sensible, widely accepted opinions around you.
That sounds surprisingly conformist for Descartes, the ultimate individual thinker.
It does, doesn't it? But remember, it's provisional. In the absence of certain knowledge, sticking with the moderate, established path is the safest bet to avoid trouble while you're sorting out the truth. It's practical.
Okay, practical conformism, got it. What's the second maxim?
Be firm and decisive in your actions. Once you've chosen a course, even if you're not 100% sure, stick to it as if it were certain.
Why? Just to avoid dithering.
Pretty much. He wants to avoid irresolution, that state of anxiety and indecision that just paralyzes you. He uses that analogy of being lost in a forest.
Oh yeah, the traveler.
Yeah.
Better to pick a direction and walk straight than wander in circles or stand still.
Exactly. Even if the path isn't perfect, consistent action is better than being stuck. And this idea, sticking firmly to judgments even if they're uncertain, pops up again later.
Interesting. Okay, maxim 3.
Master yourself rather than fortune. Change your desires rather than the order of the world.
Ah, the Stoic influence. Focus on what you can control.
Very much so. He argues the only thing fully in our power is our thoughts, our volitions. So work on managing your internal world, your desires, rather than battling external circumstances you can't change.
Easier said than done, though.
Oh, definitely. He admits it requires long practice and repeated meditation, but it connects directly to his later ideas on managing passions and achieving virtue, particularly generosity.
Okay, and the fourth one, the maybe maxim.
Right. M4 is basically dedicate your life to cultivating reason and seeking truth using his method.
So it's less a rule for how to act day to day and more the overall project.
Kind of. It's the foundation for the other three, in a way. It restates the whole point of the exercise to find the knowledge needed for a truly well-founded morality, that perfect system. The fact he sometimes just talks about 3 rules suggests M4 is maybe on a different level.
It's the goal, driving the need for the provisional rules.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that sets the stage. Let's move into his later thinking, what the source calls Cartesian virtue.
Right. This is mainly from around 1644 or 1649, and the core idea, very consistently presented in Letters and the Passions, is that virtue is the firm and constant resolution to use the will well.
Use the will well, what does that break down into?
2 main things. 1, the firm resolve to always make the best possible moral judgments you can. 2, the firm resolve to actually execute those judgments, to act on them as best you can.
So judging well and acting well both require that firmness, that resolution.
Exactly. And we're talking specifically about moral virtue here, not just being smart or knowledgeable.
Okay, and this definition, he thought it was new, a break from the past.
He did. He explicitly told Elizabeth his definition was novel, and he criticized the older way of dividing virtue into different kinds, like courage, temperance, wisdom, the way Aristotle did.
Aristotle saw them as distinct character traits, right? Finding the mean.
Correct. Descartes says no. Fundamentally, all these so-called virtues share the same nature. That resolution to use the will well. It's a unified concept. He tells Queen Christina it alone constitutes all the virtues.
That's a radical simplification. So this one resolution covers everything.
In his view, yes. And achieving this unified virtue is wisdom.
Okay, but why the will? Why is that the seat of virtue?
It comes back to control and responsibility. Praise and blame, he argues, only make sense for things we truly control.
And for Descartes, that's our volitions, our choices.
Precisely. The freedom to dispose of our volitions is our core power. Therefore, our highest good, the thing we can be praised for, must lie in the virtuous use of that will.
So external things, health, wealth, whatever, they might be good, but they aren't virtue itself.
Exactly. They aren't necessary or sufficient. The source uses the example of a virtuous person being tortured. They might suffer terribly, but their virtue, rooted in their will's resolution, remains intact. Virtue is about how we respond with our will.
And this connects to self-worth.
Yes, our will is the source of our personal worth, our justified self-esteem. He even suggests it's how we resemble God, being masters of ourselves through our will.
But it's not just about willpower, is it? The intellect has a role. You mentioned virtue unenlightened by the intellect is false.
Crucial point, yes. The will needs guidance. You need some knowledge of the truth to exercise virtue properly. You can't just blindly resolve things.
So you need to know what's good before you can resolve to do it.
Basically, yes. Though he acknowledges we might only manage a modest knowledge of the most necessary truths. But knowledge is required to judge well. It's a shift from the provisional morality's reliance on custom.
Okay, so judging well, then acting well. What kind of knowledge are we talking about?
Well, the source breaks it down into theoretical and practical knowledge needed for good judgment.
Let's start with theoretical. There are those 6 truths mentioned in a letter to Elizabeth.
That's right. 6 key truths. 4 are general metaphysical physical truths. T1, God exists.
Which helps us accept things, love God.
P2, the mind and body are distinct.
which lessens fear of death, makes us value the mind,
T3, the universe is immense.
which fosters humility, stops us being self-centered. The source notes this explicitly links his physics to ethics,
Right. And T4, the universe is interconnected. We're all parts of a whole.
leading to consideration for others, love, generosity, prioritizing the group.
Exactly. Then there are two more specific truths for guiding action. T5, the passions can mislead us, exaggerating values.
Like wanting pleasure too much.
And T6, it's okay to follow customary opinions if they seem reasonable.
Ah, that first provisional maxim again. Still relevant.
It seems so. Acknowledging the practical need for some reliance on convention.
Okay, so we need to know these 6 truths, but just knowing them isn't enough.
No. That's where the practical knowledge comes in. Descartes stresses we need to turn T1, T6 into habits of belief through frequent meditation.
Make them second nature.
Exactly. He says our failures usually stem not from lacking the theory, but from lacking the practice, the ingrained, firm habit of believing and applying these truths. It needs to be automatic, almost.
Like muscle memory for the mind. But wait, if knowing these truths is so important for virtue, what about people who aren't great philosophers? Can they still be virtuous?
Good question, and Descartes addresses it. The source points to the dedicatory letter again, where he says even those less intellectually gifted can achieve virtue and wisdom if they have that fundamental, firm resolve to learn what they can and always act on what they judge to be right.
So the core is still the will's resolution.
Yes. The essence of virtue is the will, but the degree of virtue, how well it manifests, depends on the quality of the judgments guiding the will, which relates back to that intellectual understanding.
So there's like ideal virtue with full knowledge, and then attainable virtue for those doing their best with what they know.
That seems to be the idea. The resolution is key, but knowledge perfects it.
This brings up how we actually know what's morally right. Does Descartes have a specific moral epistemology?
It's tied into his general epistemology. Remember his levels in the Meditations? Scientia, perfect, certain knowledge. Cognitio, awareness, justified belief. And persuasio, mere opinion.
Right. Scientia needs absolute certainty, clear and distinct ideas, divine guarantee.
Exactly. And Descartes distinguishes between theoretical contemplation of truth and the practical conduct of life. He says, flat out in the second, replies that in practical matters, we often can't wait for that scientia level certainty.
You have to make a call.
Right. And there are reasons why practical judgments can't reach scientia. 1, time pressure. We have to act. 2, we rely on senses and imagination for information about the world, consequences, other people. And these faculties, for Descartes, don't provide clear and distinct ideas. They're inherently imperfect.
So the best we can hope for in ethics isn't absolute certainty.
It seems not. He talks about moral certainty, a certainty that's sufficient for guiding our actions, even if we know it's not metaphysically infallible. It falls short of scientia.
So are moral judgments just opinions then? Persuasio?
No, they seem to be cognitio. They're justifiable, we can reason about them, they can be true or false. He's a cognitivist. But a finite mind can't achieve ultimate scientia-level certainty about whether its specific first-order moral judgments are true.
We do our best, based on reason and evidence, achieving moral certainty, but we can't guarantee we're absolutely right.
That's the picture, which loops back perfectly to why resolution is the heart of virtue.
Because we have to act decisively despite lacking absolute certainty.
Precisely. Life demands action, perception is imperfect, time is limited. These things breed irresolution. Virtue is the firm resolve to make the best judgment possible anyway and act on it, without later regret if it turns out wrong based on unforeseen factors.
And our responsibility lies purely in that resolution, that use of the will.
Yes, because that's the only thing truly under our control. It echoes that second provisional maxim, again, be firm and decisive. We're responsible for our volitions, our intentions, our resolved effort.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly to feelings, the passions of the soul. Not strictly ethics, but vital for it.
Absolutely vital. He says himself he's explaining them as a natural philosopher, but he ends the book by stating that basically all good and evil in life depend on the passions, and wisdom's main job is to master them.
That's a huge claim. So what are passions for Descartes?
In a general sense, any passive state of the soul, any perception. But strictly speaking, in the passions, they are specific perceptions or emotions caused and amplified by the animal spirits, those physical movements in the body affecting the soul. They're mind-body events.
And he boils them down to 6 basic ones.
Yes. Wonder, love, hatred, joy, sadness, and desire. Everything else is a mix or variation of these.
What's their job, their function?
Generally, to incline the soul to want what nature deems useful for the mind-body composite and to get the body moving to pursue or avoid those things. Preservation, essentially.
So they signal what's good or bad for us and motivate us.
Kind of. It's a bit different from sensation, which just informs the mind about benefit harm. Passions dispose the soul to desire and move the body. This leads to a debate. Are they mainly representational, telling us something is good, bad, or just motivational, pushing us?
What's the standard view?
That they're both. They represent things as having value, but as we saw with T5, they often misrepresent or exaggerate that value. Reason needs to regulate them.
And the alternative?
That they are purely motivational. They don't represent value themselves, but rather strengthen and prolong thoughts about value that are useful. On this view, reason does the representing, passions just add the oomph.
Interesting distinction. Now, one specific passion or virtue seems crucial: generosity. The source calls it the key to all the virtues and a general remedy for all the disorders of the passions. That's a big deal.
It really is. It starts as a passion, a form of wonder, but becomes the cornerstone virtue.
How does he define it?
It's having the greatest legitimate self-esteem. This comes from two things. First, knowing that nothing truly belongs to you except your free will, and that praise, blame apply only to its use. Second, feeling within yourself a firm and constant resolution to use that free will to always do what you judge best.
That first part, again, only the will truly belongs to us.
Yeah.
Is that a metaphysical claim about our essence? Or just about control and responsibility?
That's the interpretative crux. Is he saying we're essentially willing things, res villains, or just that the will is the only thing we control and are judged by, making it the basis of our worth, the evaluative reading? Probably the latter is more standard, but the debate exists.
How do we become generous? Do we just decide?
Not quite. He says we acquire it by frequently thinking about free will, its power, the benefits of using it well, and also by observing the emptiness of other pursuits, like chasing fame or fortune, reflecting on what truly matters.
And how does it remedy the other passions?
By correcting our values. If your self-esteem is properly grounded in your virtuous will, you're less likely to be swayed by passions that exaggerate the importance of external things, wealth, status, pleasure, or things outside your control. It helps you value the right things, essentially yourself and others as free agents.
So it makes you less prone to anger, envy, fear.
Exactly, because those often stem from overvaluing things you might lose or can't attain. Generosity provides an inner stability.
That makes you other regarding.
Yes, fundamentally. The truly generous person, Descartes says, is courteous, helpful, and prioritizes the public good. Why? Because they recognize that same capacity for free will, that same potential for virtue in everyone else. They respect that freedom in others as they value it in themselves.
That natural leads us to love them, another passion with big ethical weight.
Huge. For Descartes, love ideally is altruistic, even involving self-sacrifice. He distinguishes types of affection, friendship, devotion, etc., but the general definition is key.
Which is?
An emotion caused by animal spirits that prompts the soul to join itself willingly to agreeable objects.
Join itself willingly. What does that mean in practice?
It means considering yourself united with the loved object, imagining a larger whole of which you are both parts.
Is that a literal metaphysical union? Are we really parts of a larger whole?
Again, there's a debate. The metaphysical reading points to his T4, interconnectedness, and suggests, yes, maybe we are literally parts of humanity, the universe, but that clashes a bit with his substance dualism.
For the alternative.
The practical reading. We should think of ourselves, consider ourselves as parts of a larger whole for ethical reasons. It fosters connection, shared joy, and concern. Even if we aren't metaphysically fused, it's about adopting an expansive perspective.
Either way, love combats egoism and makes us care about others' well-being and virtue.
Precisely. It expands the self, ethically speaking.
So virtue, generosity, love.
Yeah.
What's the ultimate goal? Happiness.
Yes, but he's careful with the term. Generally, happiness is inner contentment from satisfied desires, but he distinguishes bonheur from felicitas, or beatitude.
Ordinary happiness versus blessedness.
Kind of. Bonheur is contentment from luck, external goods, desires maybe not guided by reason. It's fragile. Beatitude is supreme contentment arising from satisfying desires regulated by reason, prioritizing virtue and wisdom, things dependent on our will.
So true happiness, blessedness comes from virtue.
Yes, external goods are nice. They contribute to well-being, quality of life, but they aren't necessary or sufficient for this deeper, stable contentment. Only virtue is.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground. How do scholars try to categorize Cartesian ethics overall? Is it virtue ethics? Something else?
Oh, well, it's debated. Some, like Lisa Shapiro, argue he is a virtue ethicist because virtue is the highest good, though they admit it's different from Aristotle, more focus on intention for Descartes.
But not everyone agrees.
No, Noah Neumannzotter sees it as deontological virtue ethics. The focus is on a duty commanded by reason to practice virtue.
So duty-based.
In a sense, yes. Then others, like Franz Svensson, argue it's not virtue ethics at all. They claim it's about results promoting your own perfection, making it more teleological or consequentialist.
Wow. Virtue, duty, consequences. Quite a range of interpretations. Let's circle back finally to that tree. How systematic is the connection between ethics and the rest? Two main views.
Right. First, the epistemological reading sees the tree as an order of knowing. You need metaphysics and epistemology first to acquire virtue and happiness. Reason needs perfecting via knowledge before ethics is possible. On this view, ethics isn't really in the Meditations, for instance.
Knowledge first, then ethics on top. What's the other view?
The organic reading. Scholars like Shapiro, Rodas, Lewis see it as more interconnected, like a real tree. All parts grow together, influence each other. Practical ethics doesn't necessarily wait for perfect metaphysics.
So generosity might be relevant during the meditations.
Exactly. Shapiro suggests generosity might be a seed for the whole tree, and morality the highest wisdom that informs everything. This view sees a deeper, more integrated systematicity, with ethics woven throughout, not just tacked on at the end.
A much more holistic picture.
Definitely.
Okay, well, this has been incredibly illuminating. We've really unpacked the side of Descartes that's often missed. That focus on the will, virtue as resolution, the role of passions, the link to knowledge, the pursuit of blessedness.
Yeah, even without that single ethical treatise, his thought offers a really distinct and I think still very relevant perspective on living well. It's all interconnected with his broader philosophy.
So for you, learner, listening in, maybe reflect on that. Descartes' focus on the will, on inner resolution. How does that resonate with how we think about ethics and responsibility today?
And maybe chew on this thought. That idea of moral certainty being good enough for action, even without absolute proof, what does that imply for navigating the complex, uncertain decisions we all face? Is striving for perfect certainty always the best path in practice?
Definitely food for thought. There's clearly more to explore in Descartes' writings and the debates around them. Thanks so much for joining us on this deep dive.
Guys, see you in another podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel.